Hey everyone, it's your favorite history buff. We are traveling with history. Today, I'm going to go over part 2 of John Quincy Adams. This should cover the presidency, one term, 1825 to 1829. Some of the things he wanted to do, some things he tried to do, some things he couldn't do. But he is the first president to be a son of another president. But anyways, why don't we begin? Now, as for this introduction, I want to go over the election of 1824. I'll go over the Erie Canal and his involvement with improving the military, the proposals he wanted, his dealings with the Mexican border, and the so-called tariff of abominations, and a few more things. Well, let's just say he was inspired by Rome. John Quincy Adams was a man ahead of his time. But, yeah, can't get everything. Now, this controversial election. So you can see on the left there, they were all Democratic Republicans I put in the names. Andrew Jackson, John Quincy Adams, Henry Clay, and William H. Crawford. Yeah. At the middle is the electoral college votes and the popular votes below. Now, as you could see, this was technically one party. These four gentlemen, Andrew Jackson was in first place, John Quincy Adams was in second place, and William H. Crawford was in third place. Henry Clay took last place between them. Even so, nonetheless, none of them had what it was needed to get the electoral college votes. As you can see on the right, required 131 electoral college votes. Well, they were just shy of it. So, how did they settle this tie? 12th Amendment. Send it to the House of Representatives, which Henry Clay was Speaker of the House, and he was in fourth place. So, he was not allowed to take part in the tie break, as in for himself. But he could help decide for the other candidates. There was the thing where he threw in this lot, and he helped get the votes for John Quincy Adams and the tiebreaker. Now, needless to say, this infuriated Andrew Jackson, who called it a corrupt bargain. Supposedly, there was a deal that if John Quincy Adams were elected president, that Henry Clay would become Secretary of State. And he did become a Secretary of State, because that was a stepping stone to the presidency. Although Andrew Jackson's account is that he claimed that Henry Clay was going to get him the votes so he could become his Secretary of State. Nobody knows what really happened, but it's the first time a president gains the presidency without the popular vote. And, well, and this tiebreaker is another time. But you get the story. It was blood and fury, a lot of insults, and Andrew Jackson's supporters would hound John Quincy Adams for the 4 years in his presidency. It was pretty ugly. But let's move on. Now for the issue on slavery. Of course, it was said that he did rely on the slaves of his niece and his nephew, both of them from his wife's side. Of course, owned by his wife's father, or his father-in-law, who had a plantation in Maryland, I believe. John Quincy Adams, however, hated slavery. He's not a fan of it at all. No real love for slave owners, but even with this quote, "I abhor slavery and did not suffer it in my family," said that after his presidency in 1832. But nonetheless, there was the controversy that he may have relied on him. I don't know. But let's just say we'll get to that part in part 3. Now, to the next part. His inaugural address. Ha ha ha. His speech was too formal for everyone due to his impressive intellect? Well, I put that there because he sounded aristocratic. Despite him being a Democratic Republican, formerly a Federalist, he still has New England roots. From Massachusetts, after all, and people found him too snobbish, if I were to say. And of course, a lot of his policies did not sit well with many in Congress, hence alienated. He also wanted more trade with the Caribbean colonies in South America. The General Reciprocity Act of 1824, well, that was from his predecessor, James Monroe, which demanded fair trade between all the nations. So he wanted to emphasize on that one. But nonetheless, it wasn't all that was cut out to be, I guess. Here on the left is inaugural address. Forgive me for the small text. The best picture I could find. Ha! The Erie Canal. This map may have been a little after the time, but it finished the connection between Lake Erie and New York City. This is important because the Atlantic transatlantic marketplaces grew, agricultural, more food, crops. So yeah, this was very important. Now for the part where I mentioned one of his visions that he wanted. When I put he wanted to appropriate funds to improve the infrastructure, I meant the roads. Make traveling easier. This was all during October 26, 1825, but yeah, this was his ahead-of-time vision, of just being inspired by Rome. Needless to say, I don't think it came out to be as he envisioned. Or should I say, no one really helped him with it. Put it plain and simple. But enjoy the map if you want. Now, to the next part. The military form. Keep in mind that President Adams never served in the military, but he was still important for this part. His administration was concerned by the military standardization, and he concurred with them. So, as I put in the Joint House and Senate resolution, well, let's just say they wanted the production of military training manuals. This was proposed by Secretary of War May 1st, 1826. John Quincy Adams signed it into law. And so he had a small hand in improving the military. This guy was very brilliant. Well, they all were. But, yeah, you get the drift on that one. You can look at the picture, but good luck reading all that. Now, you see the two founding fathers in the picture. On the left is the third president, Thomas Jefferson, and on the right is the second president, John Adams, father of course, John Quincy Adams. The two former presidents died on the 4th of July. That was 50th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. The Sage of Monticello and the Sage of Quincy, I believe. Well, they both died hours apart. Thomas Jefferson was 83, and John Adams was 90. Thomas Jefferson died first, and then John Adams died, incorrectly stating that Jefferson lives on. Well, I guess he could have also made his legacy, which he would be correct on that. But at least they died on good terms. And John Adams got to live just in time to see his son become the President of the United States. I know Thomas Jefferson may have showed some concern, but I think he approved it as well. Nonetheless, these two men are here because they had an impact on John Quincy Adams. As diplomats, no doubt he learned a lot from both of them. Two legendary figures, founding fathers. Nonetheless, they would be two of three presidents to die on the 4th. We'll get to that, of course, and the third being James Monroe, if you remember my other videos. Now, let's get to the next point. Some unresolved issues. Woohoo. Now, you remember the Treaty of Ghent? That was to settle the War of 1812. But John Quincy Adams finalized the settlement. It was unresolved by it, with the guidance of Tsar Nicholas I of Russia. He also had to close all American ports, citing disagreements with the British, tariffs, navigation duty. He called it a continental cartel, or an illegal trading bit. It was unethical, so he says, but he was trying to fix the system. I'm gonna say it probably didn't go so well, but can't blame him for trying. Now, for the next part. Joe appoints out of South Carolina. Well, he accedes to a Mexican boundary settlement for the United States, and that means accedes means gains more. Make it fair. Also, cede means split away, so those are opposites. Held President Adams. After all, he worked in this administration. But John Quincy Adams unsuccessfully tried to negotiate more favorable borders than the Sabine River. He didn't quite get it. See, on the map on the right, should be the Sabine River. Near the area what today would be Texas, and by what today would be Louisiana if you recognize the shapes. He tried to do the more peaceful part of it. Well, it didn't quite work out, but can't fault him for that, can you? His visions, well, things weren't going according to plan. But, anyways, let's move on. Nicaraguan Canal. Antonio Jose Soares, forgive the butchery, a Guatemalan minister to the United States, proposed the construction of canal joining the Pacific and the Atlantic through Nicaragua. Make ship traveling much faster, trading much easier. But can't be a little issue. A little bit of instability derailed the plans, but it wasn't all bad. The effort still demonstrated the supremacy of the United States over Central America. Yeah, President Adams did his best, but alas, he couldn't get it all. Now, this is the part. The tariff of abominations, controversial yet again. South Carolina Vice President John C. Callahan. Well, he may have been John Quincy Adams' vice president, but he also took Jackson's side about the corrupt bargain. Both their support for him by setting John Quincy Adams up for failure. When Congress passed a new tariff bill for high tariffs on raw materials and British woolens. Well, the plan here was with the Jackson supporters. The Northeast to support it, while the Jackson men in the Southwest were to oppose it. This rift was supposed to, well, it's supposed to break apart John Quincy Adams' presidency. And oh boy, it did. Callahan wrote the South Carolina exposition in protest calling the tariff unconstitutional. Granted, this was his sneaky plan, and it shattered John Quincy Adams' chance in that rematch that would come to be. So yeah, kinda right, John C. Callahan. Maybe one of the greatest politicians, or so they say, but that doesn't exactly make what he did ethical. Well, anyway, now for the rematch. There's Andrew Jackson on the left. Andrew Jackson would defeat incumbent President John Quincy Adams in the election in 1828 with his newly formed Democratic Party, which was also in 1828. Old Hickory won the popular vote by 56% and got the landslide of the Electoral College. He won 178 over Adams' 83. Yet another bitter election. It was unfortunate, but Andrew Jackson was elected the 7th President of the United States, and the first Democrat to be one. But, anyways, we'll get through the next part. I want to thank you all for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. Ding the bell if you want more. And of course, we'll get to after presidency of John Quincy Adams later on. If you have an argument, try to keep it civilized. Suggestions, let me know. You know the usual. Let's be civil. Bye-bye now.